Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Ashishi. For those of you who don't know, we're the Monash Energy Club, and we've got our president Alex here today as well, and Atika, who's also on the committee. And today we'll be hearing from three guests from the energy industry. The first, Gary La, who's a graduate renewable energy engineer at AECOM. And second, we have Nicole Dodd, who is a senior analyst at the market design team at AEMO, and Emily Brebner, a technical sales engineer at Vestas. So if you guys have any questions, we'll ask you to raise your hand in the Zoom function, and we'll be taking questions at the end of each speaker, but we'll also have a general discussion and Q&A session at the end of all three presentations. So we'll start off with Gary.
Hi everybody, thanks Shishi for the introduction. Can we move on to the next page? So a bit about myself, for everyone that doesn't know me. My name is Gary La and I studied at Monash University, an environmental engineering and science degree. So that took 7 years when it should have taken 5, unfortunately, but I'm quite happy I was able to spend a bit more time at university. My current experience to date was 2 years at Vestas Wind Systems. I joined Vestas when I was still at university. And that's part of the reason why I took a bit more time at university, was because I took some time off to work full time as a student engineer. And during that time, I worked with Vestas up until the end of my graduation in 2018. And then I joined AECOM as a graduate just last year. So I've been at AECOM for about 1.5 years. Bit about me and passion. I love traveling, but obviously now with coronavirus, it's a bit hard. So some of my favorite destinations are Hong Kong, because I guess it's my background, so I feel quite at home there. Galapagos Islands, because I love ecology and animals and science. And yeah, wind farms is something that definitely piqued my interest. So if I ever see one while driving down the highway, generally would be taking a good look and maybe visiting it if I can, if I'm on break. So next slide, please. So a bit about AECOM. What does AECOM do? AECOM is a consultancy. We're one of the largest consultancies that work on all sorts of infrastructure projects. As you can see here, I've got 4 examples. Infrastructure projects can involve buildings. It can involve the metro tunnel that are currently at work in, I guess, Melbourne CBD. On the left-hand side, you can see we work on universities as well. There's RMIT in the top left-hand corner, and there's Monash University in the bottom left. And we also work on airports, wind farms we build. So anything and everything that you could think of that's built and constructed as part of infrastructure, AECOM works on. And since we're a consultancy, we provide either the design services, construction services, not the physical construction, but more so project management and supervision. Or we can also deal with a whole bunch of consultancy sort of advisory services where we help them plan and develop projects from the ground up. And so that's a bit about AECOM. How did I join AECOM as a grad? I did apply for the graduate program, but one of, I guess, the key tips I'd like to leave you all with as part of, I guess, your job search is that networks are pretty important, because I didn't get my role because I was successful through the grad program. It was because one of my old colleagues at Vestas started working for AECOM, asked him for a bit of information on the, I guess, the team that I was working for, since he'd joined the renewables team. And he got me in touch with his team leader. And as part of that process, I had a few coffee catch-ups with the team leader, and we realized our interests were aligned. I knew what I was sort of looking for in terms of my interests. I was interested in more general project management and, I guess, understanding of the industry as a whole, not purely just one technology. And I was very interested in just getting to know how things were done and getting out on site. And as a result, the team leader thought our interests were quite aligned. And so he expedited my process, actually, in getting hired at AECOM, because he needed a grad. And so I didn't really go through the conventional method. So I think networking and putting yourself out there, knowing what you want, is pretty important, because it can help others figure out what you need and whether they can help you out when it comes to finding your first job. So what do I do at AECOM? One of the big focuses I have is construction for new wind farms. And so one of my roles at this wind farm called Marlborough was to be on site every fortnight to observe the construction of a wind farm that's currently supplying energy to Monash University. And I'd be there every 2 weeks to drive around site, make sure the quality documentation is being captured, and also climbing turbines, as you can see in the bottom right corner, where I'd climb the turbine from top to bottom and check for any quality issues. So that's probably one of the highlights when I'm out on site. And then there's obviously a lot of work that I do inside the office. So let's see what that might be. And let's go to the next slide, Shishi. So my work at AECOM. So like I mentioned, Moro, that's one of the main wind farm projects I'm working on, where I do more construction site monitoring. But aside from that, I've also worked on a wind farm, a solar farm, as a lender's engineer, where we review the contractor's deliverables when they want to claim a payment milestone. And so we advise on potential risks or whether they should receive their payments based on how much they've done to the banks. Another project that you could work on as a consultant might be a feasibility study for a new project. And one of those that we've looked at recently was a renewable hydrogen project in Western Australia. And so that's looking at, from the ground up, where can we place a new site? What are some of the constraints from an environmental perspective, social perspective, and even sometimes an engineering perspective? But that sometimes you don't look at the engineering design until later in the track. So another project I've worked on is Australia's first offshore wind farm called Star of the South. I support the project manager in managing the budgets and some of the schedules and reporting that's required when we deliver our development approvals. And I got involved with that because I've got an environmental engineering background. What's really nice and unique about being as part of a consultancy, it's not only that you can work on a whole bunch of different projects, but if you've got an interest in a certain team, you can also reach out to develop your technical skills if they need support. And since my environmental degree was built on a bit of a civil degree as well, I'm also helping out as a pavement engineer, designing roads and new car parks and level crossings for a V-line upgrade from Geelong down to Warrnambool. So that's something left field from, I guess, what my team does, being part of energy, renewables. But I guess one of the beauties of being part of consultancy is the dynamic nature of the business and how you're able to move around. And so, yeah, aside from all those project-specific items, I guess an important key skill that I would recommend everyone focuses on is, I guess, their networking and ability to talk and, I guess, sell themselves to clients. Because a big part of my work as a consultant is developing proposals on why we should win work with new projects. And a lot of work I do nowadays is business development, where I'm developing new proposals to win, new pieces of work so we can do the projects listed above. So yeah, next slide, please. So if you're wondering what sort of opportunities AECOM provides, we have both the graduate program and a vacation program. And so graduate applications have closed for this year. However, upcoming in a month's time in July, there is the vacation program, which runs for 3 months over the summer holidays. So I'd recommend, if you're interested, doesn't matter what discipline you're in, consultancies are always willing to take on different disciplines, electrical, if you're interested in energy, civil, environmental, chemical. But what's unique about being part of the energy industry, I've realized, is that you don't need to just purely have an electrical background, I guess, which is what you've seen with my example today. You can have an environmental background, a civil background, a mechanical. You could even be a chemical engineer. Because one of the seniors I've worked with, she's a project manager for renewable wind farms now, and she came from a chemical background, and she transferred in because she was interested. So there's no limit in terms of who can apply. So if you're interested, I'd recommend joining because it's a great program. And the graduate program that I'm part of now is a 2-year program where they sort of upskill you. And really, one of the highlights has been getting to know the other grads because there's so many grads at AECOM. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. So if you can go to the next slide. Thanks for listening. Any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
I'll start off. You were working at, I think you said Vestas before
Yep.
AECOM, is that correct?
That's correct.
So did you get that job through the regular pathways, like through applying online, or was that also through a sort of networking thing?
That was a unique case where I believe Vestas reached out to RMIT, Melbourne University, as well as Swinburne. They sent out an email to a few of the, I guess, lecturers, and they sent an email out to students at each of the universities. A friend of mine actually forwarded me that email. And so it was a regular application process. I had to apply, we had a phone interview, we had a face-to-face interview, and then they decided to hire 3 students. And it turns out that they hired 1 student from each of the universities, one from Monash, one from RMIT, and Swinburne. And I think that was pure coincidence. But yeah, it was, I guess, a bit of networking, but to be honest, it was more conventional. And yeah, Emily was one of the other students that was hired, actually. So she'll be able to hear what she does at Vestas, which is, I guess, a bit of what I used to do when I was a student, and she's carried on to do that as a graduate now, which has been quite nice.
Oh, okay, that sounds cool. And I guess one more question. Have you found that at AECOM, are you sort of like one of the things I think is brought up a lot when looking for a job is that you want to be challenged in some way.
Yeah.
Have you found that you've been sort of professionally or personally challenged in some way, and has it sort of been fulfilling?
Yeah. I can very easily say that my job challenges me every day, because you don't simply work on one project as if you owned one project if you're a developer. You work on multiple projects concurrently. And what keeps it interesting, and I guess keeps me, engaged at AECOM, is that you're working on perhaps a feasibility study one day because you need to push out the first stage of the study. Then concurrently, you're also working on project managing the schedule or budget for another project. And you might have a 3rd or 4th projects that's going on at the same time. And so that's definitely challenging, trying to manage your time. And sometimes it does lead to a few more hours being spent at work. But since it's so dynamic, every day you're learning something new. And if you're not, then you can always easily reach out to different teams and to tell your team leader, hey, I'm interested in developing these new skills that I haven't necessarily had any exposure to. And part of the process is building your career as a young professional is that you sort of figure out what it is you want to do as you progress in your career. And I guess the first stages of your career is that, sandbox where you can try new things. And I think being part of a consultancy like AECOM is really good for that, because there's such flexibility in where you work and what you do.
All right. Did anybody else have any questions? Is anybody considering working at a consultancy firm or AECOM specifically? You can have your chance to sort of find out what it's like.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah. So my background, so my background is in mechanical engineering. I completed my bachelor's in mechanical, and I'm currently pursuing my mechanical engineering degree in my master's course. Yep. And I've always had an interest to get into the renewable sector, manage projects with related to wind energy, solar energy, so and so. How exactly would a mechanical engineer start this process of getting into the renewable sphere? Is there something specific that we have to accomplish in terms of certification program, or any being a part of an internship wherein I am a part of a renewable company as such? What are the prerequisites to get into the renewable sector from a mechanical perspective?
Right. Yep. That's a really good question. And I guess when we think of renewables, first thing we think of is electrical engineering, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that surprised me when I joined the team as a civil/environmental engineer. And so the really simple answer, as a mechanical engineer, that's really relevant to renewables. There's no prerequisites, so to say. If someone's willing to provide you an opportunity to work as a team member as part of their, team, then they will do so. There's no need to be concerned that a mechanical engineering degree is any less than an electrical engineering degree, because if you think about wind farms, for example, you've got moving parts, such as the actual rotor of the turbine. And what I've found is that mechanical engineers are really well suited for doing the inspections I do for turbines, because they pick out quality issues related to not only electrical, but the mechanical moving parts, because they might see something that might not be properly, oiled, or there might be certain loose bolts or nuts that they could point out. And so it's quite general. Being part of the renewable energy industry, there's so many different streams you can be a part of. You can be more technical, you could be more general as a project manager, but as a mechanical, I think that's a perfect degree for pursuing it. And you shouldn't be scared of pursuing renewables with a mechanical engineering degree, because anything that involves construction of, I guess, moving parts, it could even be solar panels which track the sun. They all require mechanical engineers to review their systems. And it's all part of the process. That one thing I've realized as part of this industry is that it's so multidisciplinary. You've got all the different components feeding into it, not just electrical. So yeah, that's why I've recommended if you've got a civil, environmental, electrical, mechanical, even a commerce or science degree, they'll still be willing to look at you, even if you apply. So yeah, all you need to do is look out for those opportunities and put your best step forward.
All right, thank you.
No worries.
Can I just jump in as well? When I was applying for internships last year, I was applying for Snowy Hydro, and I noticed they had roles for mechanical engineers because they were looking for civil, mechanical, and electrical. So I guess it just depends on the role that you're wanting to apply for. Yeah. There's definitely roles for mechanical engineers within renewables. So yeah, I think just looking out for those would be helpful.
All right, thank you. That was helpful.
Are there any other questions for Gary? Nicholas Cohen, you've raised your hand.
Yes, I actually had a question. So
yep, go ahead.
So Gary, when you approach any recruiters or say during any career fairs or probably on LinkedIn, so since you're a graduate and you don't have a clear understanding of which stream you would be put in once you be a part of your company, how do you start off with them? Like, how do you start connecting or messaging them or speaking to them? Just
right. Yep. I think as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, one of the good things I think that we should all focus on as perhaps young professionals and grads is trying to figure out what it is we want to pursue, even if we aren't 100% sure if it's what we want to do for the rest of our lives. If you have an idea on what sort of direction you're interested in, at the very least, what sort of projects you might be interested in, or what sort of skills you're interested in developing, I think doing a bit of research and trying to figure out yourself what you want to do definitely helps people understand where you're coming from and help you understand what sort of opportunities there may be. And so when you approach people at career fairs, it's obviously a lot about understanding what their company does and about what sort of opportunities they have. But in addition to that, what they're doing there is obviously trying to get to understand what you want and what are you trying to get out of, I guess, understanding more about their company. Are you a new grad that has certain skills that you're interested in developing? And if so, perhaps sharing that as part of your conversation with recruiters. And people like that will definitely help them, I guess, keep in mind that you've got a mechanical degree, for example, you're interested in developing some project management skills, you're not afraid to go out on site and do more construction work and get your hands dirty. And I think being able to articulate that to my, I guess, now boss or team leader was pretty key in me being able to get the job that I've currently got, because we aligned that he needed someone that was more interested in doing more generalist work, since all of his electrical engineers didn't really want to do as much project management. And he was interested in someone that was willing to go out on site to manage subcontractors and to look at quality, because going out on site obviously takes a bit of time. If you're going out to a wind farm that's in Horsham, it's a 4-hour drive and perhaps half your week gone by the time you come back after your inspections. So yeah, being clear on, I guess, what it is you're willing to do and develop and what your interests are definitely helps people understand where you're coming from and potentially look out for opportunities for you. So that, I think that would be key when it comes to thinking about this topic. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys for the questions and thank you, Gary. I think we'll move on to the next speaker. So Nicole, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Nicole. As it says, I'm a senior market design analyst at AEMO. So apologies, I don't have any slides. I thought I'd just kind of speak a little bit about what I do and where I work and how I got to where I am. I would like to echo a lot of what Gary just spoke about as well, though. Just before I get started, I think as new grads, it's really important to kind of follow your gut a bit and try and just work through what inspires you and what you do enjoy, and don't be afraid to try new things. I think don't be worried as well if you don't know exactly what you want and where you want to end up. But I think trying it out is probably the important thing. And I think you'll probably see a bit of that through my journey as to how I've ended up as being a market design analyst at AEMO. So what I thought I'd do is just talk a little bit first about AEMO, because I think not all of you will probably know who we are and what we do. And then, yeah, as I said, my journey there. So AEMO stands for the Australian Energy Market Operator. Over 5 years ago, when I was applying for AEMO, I had never heard of it. I think that world has changed a lot now, and most of you probably have heard of AEMO. So what we are the system operator and the market operator for the national electricity market and the Southwest interconnected system and a bunch of gas systems across the country. So as the system operator for the electricity network across Australia, so the interconnected system, if you think of the transmission lines all across the east coast of Australia, it stretches right down the coast of Australia on the east coast. So right from the tip of Queensland across to the west of Adelaide, and then we have an interconnection down to Tasmania as well, mostly along the coast. Basically, as the system operator, we don't actually own any of those poles and wires. We don't own any of the generation assets. But what we do is we tell who to turn on when to make sure that they're meeting the load of the nation, so the electrical load on the system, and we work out who to turn on by how much we actually need at the time. As the market operator, so we're not just putting our finger in the wind and going, oh, you can turn on today, you tomorrow. What we're actually doing is dispatching the market. So each of those generating assets tells us how much generation they'll be willing to generate for how much money, and we put that all into a big linear program and basically decide how to dispatch the market system so that we've got the least cost energy meeting the needs of the physical system. Of course, there's a big physical system sitting behind it, which we need to keep within a bunch of limits, so voltage limits, frequency limits. And so what we do is actually, by dispatching the market, we are actually respecting those physical constraints on the system as well. We then actually settle the market off the back of that for who's getting paid and how they're getting paid. As part of that role, we also have a role in planning the network, so working out who's going to connect, how they're going to connect, and what big other developments might need to happen in the future. So that's mainly our role on the East Coast. We have a pretty similar role on the West Coast. We also have a role in the gas markets and gas system operation as well across the country. So that's a little bit about what we do. It's a very vast organisation, and we do a lot of things. But I guess, as I said, I hadn't really heard of the Australian Energy Market Operator back in the day when I was applying for grad jobs. So I guess a little bit about me. So I'm a pretty standard 20-something-year-old living in Melbourne, love coffee, going for walks, good food, good cocktail here and there. But I actually only moved to Melbourne for the job at AEMO about just over 5 years ago. So I actually grew up in Canberra, and I went to school and I studied in Canberra. So I went to the Australian National University. I studied a Bachelor of Engineering, Research and Development and a Bachelor of Science, Physics. And what the great thing about studying at ANU for me was we actually did a systems engineering degree. So I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I loved STEM and I was good at it. So I went into engineering. As I got more and more exposed to renewable projects at ANU, I realized that I was always more interested in energy projects and the energy world. As part of my degree, I got to do a bunch of different research projects. And so I focused within that energy world. And I found that I got to do a project on renewable systems, but I also got to do a project and a combined internship looking at what was the wettability of carbonate rocks. So basically looking at the oil and gas industry and looking at little carbonate rocks and how well they were filled with oil and what the best extraction processes for oil was. So it was a pretty vast experience that I had at ANU across the energy industry. Still wasn't really sure exactly where I wanted to take my career from that. Did love engineering and I did love all those projects, but I wasn't necessarily sure I wanted to do that really hands-on kind of work. going forward. And I remember this really distinct conversation I had with my mum in the middle of my 5th year, or maybe towards the start of my 5th year. I was sitting on my deck with her and she said, Nicole, what are you actually going to do when you graduate? And I was like, I don't know, apply for some graduate program somewhere. She was like, you might need to get onto that. So I went inside and I Googled energy graduate programs, and the AEMO graduate program came up. And at the time they had a bunch of videos that were kind of showing how cool it is to work at AEMO. And so I applied for that program. It was a full assessment center, interview, phone calls, and I managed to get a job at AEMO. I think because I'd had quite a vast experience, I didn't have a specific electrical engineering degree. I had a bunch of different research projects as part of my degree. I'd done physics. I think although I got a job at AEMO, so they hire about 8 to 10 graduates each year across the country, they weren't necessarily sure what to do with me. I did get to choose that I would move to Melbourne for the job, but they were kind of, I think, not really sure where to place me. Anyway, one of the group managers at the time said, yep, I'll take a grad. And they put me into a team called gas market monitoring. So this was then looking at more the financial side of what's happening in the gas markets, something that I'd never really been exposed to. I had thought my whole life that I didn't necessarily want to be involved in that kind of commerce and economic side, but I found it fascinating. I found it really interesting as to how all these things played out, so that at the end of the day, the end consumer actually gets the use of their electricity or their gas. So I started learning about the gas market and how that interplays work, how people trade gas, but in the end, other people are actually operating the pipeline system, and it gets to the homeowner in the end. And I found that things were changing in the gas market because of policy decisions that government was making. And I thought, well, I'd be really interested to find out how these policy decisions are getting made. And I ended up, so the AEMO graduate program is a 4-year, 9-month rotation program. And I ended up doing my next rotation. We got a bit of choice by that point in the market design team. I didn't think that was where I was going to want to end back up, but I just wanted to get exposed to how these kind of big policy decisions about how the electricity market or the gas market's going to develop. So what kind of renewable kind of decisions they're going to make and that sort of stuff. How would that all come together? So I did a rotation in the market design team. I loved it in the end. I found that whole process really fascinating, trying to influence that policy and make sure that what we were getting were the best outcomes for the market and system operator and for end use consumers. I did keep rotating through the graduate program. So I had an opportunity also to go and do a rotation in kind of more the risk and governance area of the organization. So that was finding a little bit more about how an organization works. And I went to some board meetings and that sort of stuff. And then I did another rotation I thought, well, I better go back to my roots, my technical roots. And I went and did another rotation in the systems capability area of our organization. So looking at actual system incidents on the system and writing reports about what was that incident. So an incident could be something like a generator coming offline unexpectedly. That can have a lot of consequences for how the system operates. And each one of them needs to be reviewed and looked into so we can learn from each one. In the end, I had made really good connections with the market design team. That was definitely where I felt like I belonged, and I ended up getting a job back in the market design team. So I've been back in the market design team now for about 3 years. And my role in the market, about 3 years nearly. So my role in the market design team is a very varied role. No day is the same. For the first little while I was back there, we were actually working on an implementation project of a new market that was coming in on the gas side. And I'm now really heavily involved in looking at the reform of the electricity markets. So, I mean, if you read any newspapers, we know that there's a lot of change that can occur and may need to occur within the electricity market and system to be able to transition to this higher renewable energy world. And I'm involved in a project that's looking at what are potential different market designs so we can actually allow the market participants, so the AGLs and the origins of the world, trade electricity so that as a system operator, we can operate the system effectively and make sure we're not at risk of blacking out every 2 seconds. And as a consumer, all end-use consumers can have the lowest cost energy. So always managing those competing interests of having a secure energy supply at lowest cost, but also facilitating the transition that's on its way. I mentioned before that when I joined AEMO, I joined with probably 6 or 7 other graduates. We all came from a vast array of backgrounds. So some of us were engineers and scientists, and some were more commerce and finance students. And I think the thing that I've learned about the energy industry is it is a very vast industry. And I know a lot of people who have started roles out and careers out in engineering and ended up coming across more to kind of the commerce and markets areas like I have, and vice versa. And I think it's a real meeting of the minds kind of industry. And it's definitely what I love about AEMO is you do need all of those different people working together. So you need those people who understand the underlying physics of the system. You need those people who understand the underlying economics. And I think every single person that works there would say that I'm always learning something else on the fly and working with my colleagues for how do we integrate best with that. So in terms of those other graduates that joined with me, I guess some have moved on into more kind of working for some of the industry participants instead. And some of the others are actually working in more kind of technical roles. So one of my colleagues and good friends from that program is now working in the operational forecasting area. So doing day-to-day forecasting of renewables and load on the system and making sure that from a day-to-day perspective, we're actually operating the system as we need to. I guess that's probably it for me, but I would just reiterate that I guess my journey, I still don't know exactly where I'm going to end up, but it's kind of a little bit trusting your gut, recognizing that when you're really interested in something, kind of pursuing that, but making sure you don't close the doors to other things that you might like. And as Gary said, kind of make the most of those networks and reach out and talk to people, but also the conventional way also works as well. So make sure you do apply for things and put your best foot forward to get those opportunities. Cool. Any questions for me?
Hey, Nicole, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I know that you were studying, then basically went straight into AEMO. Do you find that you are at a disadvantage to people who worked in other areas of the industry first before ending up at AEMO, or do you think it's been better because you haven't been biased towards certain technologies?
Yeah, really good question. I would say 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, to be honest. I think, and I guess this comes back to my point as well about having people from vast backgrounds in terms of their technical studies. I think having people from vast backgrounds in terms of their experience is also really important. So for some people who had that, some of the graduates have done more kind of internships or even pre-grad jobs in industry and then come in, and others kind of have started fresh and have more that fresh, I guess, perspective on things. And it works both ways. I think when AEMO, from my experience, when AEMO is looking at grads, they are looking at people who are genuinely passionate about the subject matter and, you know, are good and interested in what they do and are going to be able to deliver on results. But it's that passion that I think they're really looking for, as people who are invested in the energy industry. And so if you can show that through your studies or through your extracurricular reading and coming to sessions like this helps. But if you've got experience, that's great too. So I think probably not necessarily a clear answer, but whatever suits. I know personally that I've certainly found where I want to be now. I think it will be an interesting decision as to where I go from here, because I do feel like I'm in a perfect spot in terms of meeting where all those things meet together, but I do know that I'm missing some of that more commercial experience, but not having that, I just rely on my colleagues that do have it and learn from them and actually reach out to stakeholders. That's, I guess, another really big part of my job is just listening and learning from those stakeholders when we run these big reform processes and things, to find out what's interesting them and where do they want to focus. Stakeholders, whether they're commercial industry players or actually whether they're government as well, like that sort of thing. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there was a question in the chat as well. So someone messaged me with a question about whether it's possible to join or work in the energy industry graduating with an undergraduate software engineering degree. Yes, definitely. So AEMO is probably is a really good example where software engineering is highly, highly needed and recognized. So we run, as I said, a linear programming optimization machine to dispatch the market every day, and a bunch of other technical systems looking into how does the market and the system operate. So everything from engineering and analysis software to more like programming software, some of them bespoke, some of them off the shelf that we then need to work with. So there are definitely opportunities for a software engineer in the energy industry, and I'm sure the other guys would probably say the same in their companies, that there's lots of software programs that we're using constantly for energy.
Sorry, did you say linear optimization programming?
Yep.
Okay, cool. That's good to know because we're currently doing a subject on that, but yeah, awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I guess at the moment it's linear, but it's a bespoke system that was generated a long time ago when the national electricity market was working. It was a really high cutting edge technology at the time. There are it's not just linear, I guess is what I'm saying. It's also would be mixed integer, lots of optimization for how do you optimize around getting the least cost system that's still meeting the physics in the need at the time. So what we do is we turn all of those physics, I guess, constraints into linear equations to put into our software to then dispatch the system.
Yeah, that's really amazing to how it can fit an entire system in a linear model, but that's awesome. We might move on to the next speaker, Emily, and then just save our questions for the end, just so we can get through the presentations. But thank you, Nicole. It was super interesting.
No worries.
All right, Emily.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So hi, so I'm Emily. I'm a technical bid engineer at Vestas, and this is my graduate role. So hopefully today what I'll share with you is sort of my journey on how I got here and some tips and tricks that I learnt along the way. But hopefully from my experiences, you can sort of pick out what might work for you and apply that to your own journey. So next slide, please. That's just a bit of a highlight. Next one. Cool. So I suppose how I sort of got involved in renewable energy sort of really started early for me. I did a project in high school, which you can see in that tall photo on the right, that involved a solar-powered rope pump. And basically from this experience, I was like, yeah, definitely renewable energy and engineering was something that I wanted to do. I loved the design, the research aspect. I liked the project management aspect, and purely just getting to learn new things with each new phase of the project was something I really enjoyed. And so I went to RMIT after high school, and my degree is called Sustainable Systems Engineering and Industrial Design. So what that was really good for was it gave me a broad overview of a number of different engineering fields, mostly focusing on mechanical, but electrical subjects, civil subjects, even a chemistry subject. So we got a really good base there. We then also had our own bespoke sort of sustainable subjects where we got to practice sort of the theories and do some research and sort of learn about what those practices are like in actual engineering sort of contexts. And then I had my sort of like industrial design, more product design type subjects to sort of have that sort of more creative outlet, but I was able to learn skills there that I could then transfer across to my engineering and sort of boost and have a sort of point of difference to some of my other engineering peers. So I graduated at the end of last year in November, and then I've been working at Vestas since then. I suppose a couple other key experiences in my sort of university experience was I went to Cambodia in 2016 and participated in a humanitarian design summit with Engineers Without Borders. And what I really loved about this was that not only did I meet great people and got to do amazing things and see amazing things, it sort of reaffirmed to me that this is a field that I want to be in, that sort of sustainable energy type background, being able to provide a more sustainable future not only within our own contexts, but for other people across the world too. And it was also something I could add to my resume to show that I was passionate about the subject matter and that I had experience and was willing to try new things. And I suppose that also goes for my experience. I went and studied at TU Delft in the Netherlands in 2017, and again got to explore new subjects and sort of demonstrate my skills in a new context, but also sort of show and prove to myself that I could learn new things and new experiences outside my comfort zone. I suppose that was a big learning experience for me as well. So next slide. Great. And then, so while all these experiences were great and really shaped my interests and where I wanted to head, I still needed to figure out a way on how to get into the industry. So RMIT was really good for that because we have I don't know what Monash has, but I know for RMIT we have a mentoring program. And so my mentor is the guy on the top image, John. He's been working in the industry for 15 so years. And what was really good about him was that I could receive some sort of guidance and advice from someone who's had a career in the industry and has that network to sort of go, or where to place my best foot forward. And he suggested if I was interested in the renewable energy industry, we should try and attend conferences because that's a great place to network with people who are actually in the industry. And at the time, I thought it was a little bit left of center, but he goes, make a business card, have your photo on there, have your degree and a contact number, and just hand it out to as many people as you can to start that conversation. And by doing exactly that, one of those business cards ended up to a colleague of mine at Vestas, who was sort of heading up that sort of student internship program Gary was talking about earlier. And I got a phone call and he said, would you like to interview for this position? We would, seeing you at the conference, you really stood out. At the time, undergraduate engineers or student engineers weren't really there or present or represented. So it was a point of difference again to my peers. And so I did the interview, and a few months later, I was working at Vestas. That was in August of 2016. So I got to work with, as part of my first internship, along with Gary, 6 months full time. And that sort of really kick-started my industry experience. So next slide, please. And while, it added at the end of the day another 6 months to my degree, it was really the best decision career-wise to sort of take that time out and really sort of get that experience from a company that's a big player in the renewable energy industry, at least the wind industry in Australia. As you can see, you probably can see Gary on the right there, that we were really lucky as part of our internship program to experience lots of different things. So we got to climb a turbine at MacArthur Wind Farm out near Hamilton, which at the time, not sure if it still is or not, but is the largest wind farm in the Southern Hemisphere. And Gary and I even got to go to Beijing and help run and participate in sort of a team bonding / training program with one of the teams we worked with. So without sort of the stepping stones I took and the experience I had leading up to that, I wouldn't have gotten these additional experiences as well. But what was a lot more worthwhile than just the travel and the amazing people was just the pure access to knowledge. While some of the projects we went on weren't really in the thick of things, they were sort of just project adjacent, but you had access to sit in and listen in meetings and just learn from people's experiences and learn about the processes. And then we were lucky that we were sitting with two different teams, so we had two different resources to go and ask questions to, and they would take the time to sit and sort of explain things to. So I think that really sort of highlights the benefit of sort of seeking out a mentor. So at the end of the day, if you've got questions or you've got concerns or something doesn't make sense, you've got someone to go to sort of resolve all of that. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, what the biggest thing I learned from that was that no opportunity is too small. Whether it's a half an hour meeting on a topic you maybe know nothing about, to being able to travel overseas to an overseas office and meet new colleagues. All those experiences add up and are worthwhile, and you'll sort of just build a bigger picture of your own knowledge and where you want to head and what you want to do. So during my final year of university, one of my old bosses at Vestas, through my internship program, he actually reached out to me and offered me a graduate program to not only start at part-time while I finished my degree, but then graduate straight into that role once my degree was done. So unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of experience in the conventional sort of applying an interview track. Everything I've sort of gotten career-wise has been mostly via networking. But I do see the benefit in that, because I know a lot of my friends saw the stress of completing their final year and then having to like apply for internships and interviews and video calls and all that type of stuff. So I was quite fortunate that I could bypass all that, and I had my grad job set and done. So what my role is more of a broader project management type role. It sits more in the sales phase, and basically at the end of the day, we manage all the technical risks that go into a contract. So whether that's, we personally focus on the turbine itself, the design of that, making sure it's optimized, all the different add-ons and components that sort of go into it. We're ultimately responsible for that, but we also look at the grid side of things and making sure our grid connection is on track, and we help facilitate coordinate the siting of the turbines and what's the best layout and what's the best energy we can achieve. So all those technical inputs we sort of take control of when it comes to contract negotiations, and we sit with sales and the customer and sort of work all through that type of stuff. So there's a lot of soft skills in my role in terms of communication and being able to write up reports and comments and all that type of thing. But I do get to focus on the technical side of things as well, being able to learn more about the system. We're continuously doing training on all the different components that go into a turbine and all that type of thing. So I'm lucky in the sense that my role has both a balance of both. I'm not a purely technical person who sits down and does a lot of modeling or coding or anything like that. I still can touch on that, but then I also have, the reporting and some design and research, reviewing contracts and all that type of thing as well, which I find quite interesting, the commercial side. And that is a very broad scope, I realize, but it really varies day to day, project to project, what I could be working on. I don't think I've had 2 weeks that are the same yet. So that's something I quite enjoy, being able to learn something new all the time. In terms of graduate roles at Vestas, so unlike AECOM or AEMO, we don't have a formalized program, but I know myself and a couple of my other colleagues are keen to investigate ways to get students involved at Vestas, whether that's a graduate program or a student internship program like I was lucky enough to be a part of. We're investigating those possibilities, whether that's collaboration with unis like Monash for like final year projects and that type of thing, to sort of get you that sort of step into the industry, to get you to network, but also for us to be able to keep in touch with universities and the latest technologies and all that type of thing, are all possibilities. But if anyone is interested and wants to learn more about the company or what I do or what Vestas does, by all means, reach out to myself on LinkedIn or something like that, and I'm happy to help you through that process. Can't guarantee I can get you any work or anything like that, but I'm happy to sort of step you through my experience and to help you network with the various people that I know as well. So last slide is just basically some tips, and I think I touched on most of them throughout the presentation so far, but Beth sort of highlighting again what Nicole and Gary said, do your research, know where you want to be and where you want to go. And that really shows that you're passionate about the industry as well, and is a benefit from an employee's point of view, because they sort of can help you facilitate that instead of not knowing what to do with you. Networking, probably the biggest experience I've learned, that it's all about the people you know. So the sooner you can make those contacts and reach out and sort of just get talking, whether it's coffee dates, pre-COVID, that was a thing. I'm sure you can do that soon enough, but people love talking about themselves and their own experiences. And are normally more than happy to help you if you are willing to reach out and ask. So definitely just reach out and ask. And the last one is be curious. You'll never be worse off for doing something new or talking to someone else, or you always gain new things, and that will only enrich you moving forward. So just put yourself out there if you can. The more you know, the better off you'll be. So yeah, that's all from me. Any questions from anyone online?
I had a question. Thanks, Emily. Vestas is a multinational company, and I highly doubt you've been offered in your early career. But is there ever any talk of being able to work overseas, go overseas for placements, or those sorts of things?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose that maybe I didn't touch on in my presentation, but yeah, Vestas operates all around the world. So we have offices Europe, South America, North America, Asia, everywhere. So our office is in Melbourne, is connected to Asia Pacific. So our headquarters sit out of Singapore, but we have offices in Japan and Korea, those sorts of places as well. So I was lucky enough to go to Japan in February this year and work with the team there, because their market is a whole different ball game to most other markets in the world. The standards and the codes they have to sort of adhere to. So I was going over there to help out with their certification process and just help out with general project work. And I've been helping out with the Korean sales teams as well, because that market is starting to pick up. So I suppose it's really dependent, and I suppose you have to be there in the right time at the right place. But I think there's always opportunities, and that was one thing I said to my boss early on, was that if there's opportunities to travel, I'm all for it. So if you make that known, generally when those opportunities come up, your manager will be able to go, well, Emily said she was keen, I'll offer it to her first. So yeah, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. That sounds really amazing.
Yeah, I must admit, I've been lucky, but I suppose I've taken steps to create that luck, I suppose, as well. So hopefully those tips and tricks can help you guys as well.
Yeah, I have a question as well.
Go for it.
Yeah. So as a graduate engineer, like currently I'm currently still pursuing my graduate course.
Yep.
And I will be graduating the next year.
Okay.
So what exactly can we do in this process of, getting into the industry? Like, what can we do to enhance ourselves aside from, learning what we're learning in college? Like, for example, get a certification in specific facets of the industry, or, like how do we give ourselves the upper hand when it comes to getting into multinational companies such as yourself, like Vestas?
Yeah, sure. I think there's probably three things I would say. One is sort of pursue experiences that are not just offered as part of your course. So for example, I went on I applied for a volunteering program with Engineers Without Borders. And while it's still an engineering type program, it's not something directly linked to the university. So that was something extra. So those types of experiences would be one. Number two, I would say it's also how you market yourself. So for example, I play football. So, and I've been part of the leadership team in my football team. So that's nothing to do with my degree, and that's nothing to do with engineering, but I can market that to say, well, I have leadership skills via these other experiences. And my third one, I've just forgotten, networking. Networking was the other one. I think by looking up online, looking at the programs you want to apply for, or the companies you would like to apply for, start looking at the company and see who's working there, and then send them a message on LinkedIn. I've had 2 or 3 in the last 6 months, who some of them I haven't known. Some of them have purely just found me via RMIT or via other connections, but they've reached out on LinkedIn and just asked a message going, hey, I'm a graduate, or I'm a undergraduate. I'm passionate about the industry too. I would like to work in the industry. Can we just have a chat and share some experiences? And by me sharing those experiences with them, or I can go, well, maybe you should talk to Gary because he's had an environmental background and that's similar to your degree, and you sound like you want to do more consultancy type work. And then by talking to Gary, it's sort of just a trickle-on effect from there. And the more people you know, the more opportunities will be present, and you'll find something will eventuate. And while my experience hasn't been the conventional process, all the networking stuff has led me to where I am today. Like Nicole said, don't stop yourself from going down the conventional route too. Play all the different avenues that you can, because at the end of the day, the more you expose yourself to the industry, the more likely something will come up. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
Perfect.
Hey, Emily, I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned about the importance of a mentor, correct? So
yeah.
Suppose the university doesn't have a specific mentoring program.
Yeah.
Then whom do you suggest we can approach to guide us during our graduate program to lead us to correct path?
I think just because your university doesn't have a mentoring program doesn't mean there's other faculty members or other students at your university or alumni or anything like that who you can't reach out to for that same mentoring experience. Again, you've just made all these connections by attending this networking event and by asking a question. So there's by no means you can't reach out to someone here and ask for that sort of guidance and advice. I think it ultimately depends on where you want to head, but I think your university lecturers and tutors are always a good start. Past students from your degree or other, alumni who've been involved in the Monash Energy Club, they're all potential mentors that you can reach out to for the same sort of guidance and advice.
Sure. Thank you, Emily.
No worries.
So it is 1 o'clock. So if there are any questions, we might just hold off on it because our presenters might need to leave for work. Is that right? But again, I just want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this presentation and like sharing your experiences with everyone, because it is really invaluable to all of us. And we, thank you for Alex and Atitha for also helping me set this up. But yeah, just because we've run out of time, I feel like we just have to cut it a bit short. But again, just feel free to email the Monash Energy Club and maybe we can pass on the details of the presenters today or just find them on LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Hope this has been valuable. And thank you to all the presenters.
Thanks, guys. Good luck to everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Good
very
luck,
much.
everyone.